Join friends and welcome. I'm Antonio and this is the Grass Friends podcast where I learn anything on starting a regenerative farm. In this episode I had the pleasure to have as guests Filip and Maria Sever, I hope I pronounced them correctly, that is a Croatian homesteading couple pursuing freedom and self-sufficiency as they describe themselves on Twitter. We've talked about how and why they moved to the countryside and started the farm from scratch, why they opted for no tractors or other expensive farming tools, why they don't have a fridge, how much you need to start living this kind of life, and much more. If you want to learn more about them, you can find them on Twitter at redbelesov. But now, please enjoy the conversation with Filip and Maria Sever. If you want to go with a bit of backstory, what you were doing before getting into farming and so on, because I've seen your Twitter account is like 1 year old, something like this, so it shouldn't be that much time that you're doing this.
It wasn't that much time. I did a lot of things. I did a lot of different jobs. Nothing for a very long time. My last job was a baker. I was a baker working night shifts. Before that, I was a logger, felling trees and stuff. Before that, I was an opera singer. Then I was a language teacher. I did a ton of stuff, but I'm not really the kind of person that can fit into a work environment for very long periods of time. So this is kind of why I chose this life, a bit more isolated, with less people around. And my wife, she's kind of like that too. Well, she is younger than me, so she is still a student at the university. She studies Russian and Polish, but we kind of share that love for, well, we can call it isolation, I guess. Mm-hmm. We love being, on our own. Well, our closest neighbor here is 1 kilometer away, and we are very fond of that. Some will say it's a bit antisocial, but I mean, we can't help it. That's how we are.
How is the relationship with the neighbors? Do you still have a sort of community there?
It's a sort of relationship that we know they are there and they know we are here. And if we need them or they need us, then we can call on each other and help each other. But there is no socializing really of any significant nature.
Are they living similar to you, or there is a town close to you?
Oh, well, there's a very small village, I think it's maybe 50 people, our village. Wow. Yeah, so it's really small because in Croatia, our country, over the last maybe 20 years or so, our agriculture has suffered a great decline. Mm-hmm. So villages have become depopulated, and it's a serious problem. But on the other hand, it makes things easier for people that want to buy land, and settle and live like this because land is cheap.
Did you buy the land? Did you inherited it?
My grandparents bought this plot, and they had a vision for it. My grandfather, he wanted to do a ranch here for raising ostriches. That was the idea. But they were involved in other things, and time passes, and so the thing never materialized.
And so, how did you get there?
We came here. What was it? Like 16 months ago, I believe. Before that, we lived in another village. It was a really small house, and we had a very small yard. It was just like 80 square meters of yard, I think. Mm-hmm. So really small.
Yeah.
And it wasn't big enough to do any serious animal husbandry there. So we eventually decided, to just gather up the courage and do this step. And because it was quite, it was a big step, because prior to us coming here, it was just thorns. There wasn't even grass here. It was completely overgrown. And it's just this little cabin, no running water, no electricity, no nothing, no toilets, whatever you think, there wasn't that. That thing wasn't there. So it was a situation of just getting it to be more and more hospitable little by little.
How long did
And
it take to make it a hospital?
it's an ongoing process, but right now it's much easier than it was when we came, because we came in February, and there wasn't even a stove here. So
Oh.
that winter we did without heating. Just working during the day to keep warm, and getting under the covers at night and waiting for spring. And that's how it was for the remaining of that winter. And now at least we have a wood stove. We have a kind of this basics that you really can't do without.
Did you build everything on your own?
Well, no, the cabin was here when we arrived. Like the cabin built, I think, a few decades ago. I think it was originally meant more as a storehouse of some sort than as a living space, but it's cozy enough and it works. We don't have high expectations.
Sure. I can see you can have an internet connection.
We installed a solar panel on the roof so we can charge the phone.
You're self-sufficient also from an energy standpoint.
Well, yes, but because we don't need much of it, we don't have refrigerators or washing machines or things that
You don't?
No, because that would require a lot more power, and then we would have to bring in more technology and more apparatuses, and then we try to kind of be cautious with it, not to introduce to things that would perhaps create more complications than it's worth.
How do you manage to save food? You have animals, and I can guess you have to deal with a lot of food all at once. So I would expect the refrigerator to be a must in this kind of situation, but maybe you're managing without.
No, we don't have a refrigerator, and as far as our situation, with the food, something that helps during the warm months is we have a well here, and the water in the well is always cold. So you can kind of use the cold water to make food last longer. But as far as long-term meat preservation, we will not be getting a fridge. We will be building a smokehouse. It's one of our next projects. So we will be drying and smoking the meat. So far, our food situation has been all over the place. We've had periods when we were pretty much completely self-sufficient and just for months eating only stuff that we produce ourselves. Then we had a few months when we had to buy food because we ran out of that food, and we don't know, because we're beginners at this, we don't know how the cycles of the year even work, in regards to how much a garden produces and stuff. So we're finding it out all along the way. And I have this idea of trying to do it on the first day of the next summer, so in a little more than a year, going myself on a completely eating only stuff that I produced here, and just trying to see how it would work.
At the moment, how much percentage you are eating that you are producing, and how much is bought outside?
It kind of changes every month or two. Right now, we buy more food than we produce. Soon, we will have, the spring and the early summer. We expect to have a lot of excess food. Last year, during one part of the year, you have almost nothing. Then during what was it, summer, you are feeding zucchini to goats because you have too much of them. And we have to, what we're trying to learn is kind of make this supply of food more stable throughout the year, instead of having, just a truckload of it one part of the year and then none of it like 3 months later.
Regarding animals,
we haven't really slaughtered any of our larger livestock yet. We were when it comes to our meat, we were mostly relying on small animals like rabbits, chickens, such. So that's what we have experience with slaughtering. This year will probably be our first year of slaughtering sheep. and I never really did that myself. I only participated, since I grew up on a farm also where we raised goats and sheep. So I
Hmm.
have seen the process many times, but I never did it myself.
Okay. And how do you go with learning all these new things? Do you use books, help of someone else, or just
Yeah,
try?
I mean, internet is the best thing that happened for people like us trying to live like this.
Hmm.
In the last, I guess, since the invention of agriculture, so in the last about 10,000 years, because without this marvelous thing that I'm holding in my hand, I don't know how we could manage to learn all the things we learn, because in an attempt, to be self-sufficient, you have to learn 10, a dozen different skills, and you don't have to be a master at any of them, but you have to be at least passable, and the internet is a huge, huge help there, because really YouTube and books downloaded as PDFs, it's just something that past generations couldn't count on, and we're very happy about that.
What's your current lifestyle? How does this look like?
Well, for the last many months, our life has practically been building fences, and that's almost, when you come to this a farm, or over here they call it a ranch, but in
Hmm.
America they would probably laugh at calling 15 acres a ranch. But however, you come to a place like this that is completely, no fencing, no nothing, and you come with animals. And the first year was just, it was crazy, because when you have animals, you have to keep them on your land. You can let them stray, but you don't have any fencing. So your life is just constantly looking at these animals, trying to prevent them from wandering away, from creating, agricultural damages, or from getting eaten by predators. We have a lot of those here, a lot of jackals, and now wolves and bears have come back, and uh, and so it was just, fences, 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 just and all in all, we will have what we built over 2 kilometers of fencing now, I guess, and this is a really new thing for us, because in the last 2 weeks we
Hmm.
can put our livestock on the pasture and just go and do something else without having to look every 5 minutes where they are,
Nice.
and complete revolution for us. So in regards to the question, how our days look, it's mostly different from day to day, but it's always some part of the fence building. It's either deforest, like you wake up, you eat something, you do your chores, like you feed the rabbits, and you do the things. You take the livestock out to pasture, and then like you take half an hour or so, and then you go work, and you work on whatever part of fence building you have scheduled for the day. It's either deforestation, because you have to, clear the forest where the fence will go,
Hmm.
because all of the boundaries of our land are completely overgrown with thorns and
Oh,
thickets and such. So you clean pathways through this forest, and that's the stage one. And then you kind of gather the building materials, and then it's the building, and so on and so on, and then the day, and then it comes, 8 o'clock now, 8:30. You put the livestock back in the small yard, next to the house, where we can protect them during the night, and you go to sleep. So that's about it.
okay. And what do you manage to get something else into your life besides what you're actually working on?
After we stop working, we can get into the house, and before we fall asleep, we like to, I don't know, we have fun. That's kind of fun time. maybe right now it's like from 9 to like 11:30 or midnight on average. That's the free time.
How do you manage to go on vacation? Since, as you said, it took a lot of time watching the animals. How do you manage when you have to travel, for example?
Well, we don't. So that's the simple solution. Our idea was to create the kind of life that we don't have to take a vacation from. I mean, this is our vacation, you know, and we weren't very big traveling types before, so it's not a big adjustment for us.
How many animals do you have?
Not many. I mean, cattle, we only had, up until now, we only had one heifer, and we didn't want to buy more than one because I wanted to see how she will adapt to this, you know, to this place, because it's a highland heifer, and I was kind of wondering how highlands do here, because these are not highlands, these are lowlands. These are really, we are plains, very low lying, and so it's a different kind of vegetation, it's a different kind of climate. But since she's doing so well, now we bought 2 more pregnant cows and 2 of their heifer daughters, so we will be having some more cattle coming in at the beginning of next month. We have a small herd of sheep and goats, not that much. I mean, we have maybe a dozen animals or so, a bit more, a bit more than like dozen, 15, I'm not sure, 15, yes, goats and sheep. But now we are selling the goats because sheep work better here, and we plan, as far as sheep go, we think we will probably have a small flock of like a dozen ewes, just plus a ram, and then obviously the offspring. I don't know if we will ever try to increase the number over that, and we will likely just increase the number of cattle we raise.
Why do you want to increase cattle and not having more sheep or goats, for example? Well, and what do you mean when you said that sheep works better than goats there?
Yeah, sheep work better because goats don't tolerate well the humidity of this place. A damp, foggy pastures that often get standing water on them, and goats don't like that. They get hoof problems. They get maybe respiratory problems also because of the constant damp air. And when it rains, goats don't like it. You know, you have to have a barn for them where they can stay dry and warm, whereas for sheep, it's completely not necessary. I mean, we built a barn. It was one of our projects this winter, and no matter how much it rains or snows, you know, sheep just don't care. They're out there grazing because they have wool and they have their natural lanolin oil under that, and so they are protected against the weather. And this is a really, really huge thing for us because it allows us to have animals with much less infrastructure, much less maintenance, and to keep healthier animals, because you know, that's what you have to take in consideration, like the piece of land you have, and then you have to ask yourself, okay, what works here? Because you cannot really make the land fit the animal. You have to take the animal that fits the land. And over here, it's sheep and cattle, and it's not goats. Goats need a drier climate because it's also, you know, the internal parasites. In a climate this damp, there's just too big a load of parasites for them to tolerate, and you have to give them medication. And then it's, I mean, it's not really ecological production anymore, you know.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, sheep don't require it, you know, just put them on a different pasture every once in a while, and sheep will be healthy. Same for cattle. So it was just a case weighing pros and cons. And now, why we won't increase the number of sheep, but we do want to increase the number of cattle? Well, perhaps it's a bit silly, but one thing I like is I like knowing my animals. I like being able to keep track of each one of them, because I like also the idea of selecting them for certain traits, trying to produce the best possible animal for this land. And that is hard to do when you have a really big herd, when you simply cannot keep track of the individual animals anymore. And on the farm that I grew up, we had a pretty big herd. I mean, we had about 150 animals, I believe, at most during one time. It's just impossible. You don't know the individual goats, the individual sheep. They just all become alike. So I kind of want to keep the numbers where I still can keep track of them, and that's much easier with cattle, because obviously you will not have, a herd of like 25 cattle. It's a good sized herd, but it's still a small herd of sheep. So that's one of the reasons. And I also like cattle because you can train them for work, and I have intention of doing that in the future. It's like pulling carts and stuff, pulling the wood, the hay, all those things, because I'm kind of I don't like the idea of buying a tractor or something like that. So I would much prefer to train like maybe 2 heads of cattle to do that kind of work. And I'd be very happy if that could.
What are the tools that you use, since you said that you don't buy a tractor?
Yes, well, the tools, we use hand tools. So for deforestation, that's the most important tool is a bill hook, which is like a hooked blade that's mounted on a wooden pole. That's like 1.5 meters or 2 meters long. That's the main deforestation tool. Then you have like an axe, a big axe for splitting wood. You have a hatchet, a smaller axe, which is also used in deforestation. But the hatchet can be substituted with a machete, and it also works great. Lately, one of the tools I've been using the most is a machete. And a sledgehammer, like a very big sledgehammer, is important. And then obviously you have the handsaw and the various garden tools, like the spades, the rakes, and all that stuff. I think that's pretty much it. We don't have a tractor, and we kind of want to keep it that way. And it's not just, for aesthetic reasons. It's because this low input approach, we really think it works. Because what I see makes people fail in the business sense here in my country. It's the inputs, it's the investments you have to make, because for example, tractors, once you start investing that kind of money, then you kind of have this sword hanging above your head, where you have the production has to be high enough to justify it, to justify just the. On the other hand, by working as we do and having no production costs at all, any money you make, every time we sell a lamb or a goat or whatever, that's a net profit. So that, because there is nothing to deduct, and okay, well, there is your work. People will say, well, yes, that is true, but the more you work, and the more things you have covered, the more infrastructure you build, the more land you cleared, the system becomes more and more. I could call it self-sufficient, because it's always less and less work that is required of you just for the basic production. So we are very hopeful, because we think that the system will work, and that we will be able to expand the farm to hopefully at least 10 or 12 hectares, and increase the number of cattle we will raise, and that will probably be our main source of income in the future, and that will take a couple of years to make happen. it seems to work for me, you know, in my head at least, because we see now how we can do it without investing anything but our work. So we don't see it failing in any way.
That's nice. Very often, like people think, oh, I want to retire to buy a farm and live the dream. But you're doing the opposite and say, okay, what if I first have the dream? And I also start understanding why you made the tweet about gyms and the fact that you don't need to train basically because of all the strength. The training that you do by working there. Are you just doing that, or are you sometimes supplement with some workouts?
No, I absolutely have no energy to do anything else because whatever strength I have, I just invested in the farm. I could do it, and honestly, maybe I miss it a little sometimes because you know, weight training was you know, that was me. That was my whole identity for many years.
You said you did it for 12 years, right?
Yes, yes. You know, I started. Maybe I was, I don't know, 20 years old, and my best friend introduced me, you know, to just basic gym workouts, and I got hooked immediately. And so for the first couple of years, I was very heavy into bodybuilding, natural bodybuilding. You know, I was never interested in taking synthetic hormones or anything like that. I was very off by that, very much against that. But I was very much into bodybuilding, and then I switched kind of over to powerlifting, and it was just that, you know, it was that was what gave me my dopamine fix, you know, getting a new PR, and I was, you know, pretty like naturally strong, and so I was good at it, and it was hard to let go, you know, but I knew that there was just no way because I thought, okay, I have this, I can keep doing it, I can keep adding a little bit to my total every year and try to be the best I can be, and that's what will happen then. Then I will get old, you know, and I wouldn't have done anything else that I care about because, you know, the higher you go, the more difficult it becomes to progress. So basically you have to your entire life you have to devote it to, you know, adding 5 more kilos on your bench or 10 more kilos on your deadlift. And then I imagined, you know, like one day I'll be kind of 60, 65, and I will just say, well, I have this number. And I kind of got scared by that. And so instead I decided, I mean, let's do something like this, you know, let's do something that will have lasting value. And I'm glad we made that choice. And I mean, it's she is it's her merit that we are here after all, because back when we lived in the other village, I didn't even consider it a possibility for us to move here, you know, because we were living there. I mean, it was a normal house, if small, but it had electricity, it had, you know, some kind of water. It was surrounded by other houses, so it wasn't, you know, in the middle of nowhere, you know, with jackals running around it. And I didn't even consider for a minute that I could take a walk to live in a place like this. But she was the one who actually, you know, kept telling me, you know, we should move here. We should, you know, it was something I wanted, but I just didn't think it was a possibility. But she convinced me that she could do it, and I mean, she has been just incredible over this last, you know, 16 months, and all the things, all the work she did, and all the things she endured, all the comfort that she, you know, let go. It was really much more than I expected.
Amazing. What happened when you decide that? What changed when you make the decision?
I mean, why? Well, it was because back in the other village where we had this just small yard of 80 square meters, we already had like 2 goats and 2 sheep. And because we wanted to have, you know, ruminants, it was really, we wanted it a lot. And it was just hard. It was hard keeping them fed and happy when you have this little piece of land, because then you have to take them, you have to herd them every day. You know, you have like meadows and forests around you, and you have to take them on walks like twice a day for 3 hours at least. You know, and it's no different. You know, you can have 2 goats or you can have 200 goats. It's the same kind of time investment, because
Okay.
ruminants they eat a lot of low calorie food, so they need time to ingest that food, and it was just a lot of time that you could better invest in other things if you had the time to work on those things. Like, for example, when you are here, then, you know, you build fencing, you build the barn, you do deforestation, and you do something that permanently improves the quality of your life. While you are stuck on a small piece of land, you just have to take them walking around the, you know, the village, around the forests, and then you will have, I don't know, people that will tell you, well, you cannot graze them here, and you will have the, how do you say, the forestry engineer that will say, oh, you can't bring them to this part of the forest because we have young trees here and everything. And so it's complicated, it's difficult, you know. And that was one of the big reasons why we decided to move. And I would advise anyone who wants to have ruminants, especially, you know, more than 2 or 3 dwarf goats, definitely, you know, if you can, go for the bigger piece of land, because if you have the option of choosing between, say, a bigger house, a better house on a smaller plot, or a smaller house on a bigger plot, if you want to raise
Second.
animals, your quality of life will be much better if you have more land and a smaller house than the other way around. The land always takes precedence if you have animals.
What other advice would you give to someone that wants to start this?
Oh well, it's so much things. Uh, you kind of have to, you have to learn to love physical work. You know, if you don't, perhaps if you're not used to it, because you lived a different life, or you lived in the city, perhaps you had a sedentary job. And maybe in the beginning, when you start doing work like that, it will seem very hard. But you know, your body and your mind will adapt. It's not as hard as it seems once you've had maybe 2 or 3 weeks of such work under your belt. It will become easier every day. As time goes, you will even get slightly addicted to it, because you know nothing is as fulfilling as when you are completely exhausted from the day's work, then being able to lie down. It's a huge dopamine rush, you know,
True.
that you get every day. That's kind of the advice. People shouldn't get discouraged if they see, because as you work, you will get better. And so the stuff that maybe took you before 3 or 4 days, you will be able to do it in just a few hours. I mean, that's one of the things, like the gate that I put on Twitter, the picture. Right now, like, to build a gate like that, it takes maybe, you know, with everything, with finding the trees, felling them, debarking them, and building the gate, it takes me maybe 3 hours, you know. Where the first gate I did, it was what? I did it over the course of 3 days. So you kind of have to accept the fact that you will suck in the beginning, and you will do a lot of errors. You will have to redo a lot of stuff. A lot of work will be just wasted if you don't consider it, you know, as used in the sense of you having learned something. And you have to just accept it. And the sooner you start making all these mistakes, the sooner you will learn. Right now we have 5 beehives, and we kind of try to manage those bees. And we know very little about beekeeping, and we already made tons of errors. Fortunately, you know, all the colonies are still alive and everything. But in a year's time, for next year, I will at least know something. Whereas if I didn't get the bees now, it's next year I would still know nothing about beekeeping. So that's kind of the philosophy. Just get into it as quick as you can and start fucking stuff up as soon as you can. And it's amazing how much you can learn in 1 year by doing that.
Wow. And regarding agriculture and what you select to seed and to plant, how do you choose the plants that you have and the food that you grow?
Well, it's the same approach. We didn't know anything when we came. We just bought the seeds of pretty much everything and tried to plant pretty much everything and see how it would. We have noticed that there were some plants that grew incredibly well. You know, that even our complete lack of gardening knowledge didn't manage to destroy. And that's like I already mentioned the zucchini. For some reason, they grow incredibly well here. And the other are sunflowers, which are very good, you know, for feeding chickens, feeding poultry and such. So when I will be preparing the garden this autumn, we will prepare a lot of land for sunflowers and for zucchini. And the zucchini, it might be funny, but we will use them as animal fodder because they work so good, and they grow really, really large. You know, if you let them, and they're not good for human consumption when they're that big, but they are good for animal consumption. So they grow better than pumpkins, and there is really, you know, there's not much advice you can give people. They have to try planting 50 different things, and then they will see what grows well, and and then maybe every year try to plant maybe 5 new cultures and see how they take. Like this year, we did wheat, barley, and oats, and we see that barley grows well here too. Oats were okay, you know. Potatoes grow well too. No, we have no complaints on potatoes, and this is really important, you know, because when people start gardens, yeah, this is an important advice. Like if you want to be self-reliant, at least up to a point, and produce food to feed your family, then you know, forget about salads, forget about that kind of stuff. It's good, you know. Of course, it's good to have a bit of low-calorie crops like that, but it won't make a big difference. It's not what you should be focusing on, and that's what a lot of people focus on when they do gardens. They don't think about cereals. They don't think about tubers because they kind of accept it as a fact that they will buy those, and then they grow lettuce, they grow tomatoes, and so on and so forth. They grow low-calorie crops, and that's all well and good. But I think it's the other way around. You should focus on high-calorie crops like corn, like cereals, like potatoes and such. And kind of these crops are non-negotiable. These are the crops you need. So you have to experiment with the different varieties and find like which varieties of corn or of potatoes grow well where you're from. And it's surprising when you see how little space under these crops you need to be able to produce the quantity of food that could feed you, you know, the entire year. And it's more achievable than people think, because now having tried it once, you know, that's why I say I want to do it next summer, because I think if I have everything prepared, enough land prepared, I'm pretty confident it can be done, you know, with potatoes and with cereals. And because these crops are a game changer, complete game changer in, you know, in comparison to the various low calorie crops like, I don't know, cucumbers and beets and all that stuff, which is all great, but you have to focus on the staples.
And how does your nutrition looks like?
It really depends, you know, on the time of the year, right? On how successful we have been in the last few months and what time of year it is. Sometimes, you know, it's all just stuff from our garden. Like last year, we were eating rabbits. We were constantly eating rabbits because we had so many rabbits. It was our first time, you know, when breeding rabbits, and so we didn't anticipate so many, and so we were set for meat for a pretty good time. And at other times, it's really just buying lots of cheap food in bulk, and we are not very fussy, when it comes to buying food. Like I remember back when we lived in the other village, we bought, because we were saving money. We were saving money to be able to do this kind of life transition. And so what we did is we bought a sack of wheat, 50 kilos of wheat, that was intended, as animal feed. People didn't people eat like unprocessed wheat, but we ate that just fine. We boiled it, and I kind of prefer boiled cereals over flour or bread. And so kind of that would be another advice, and something that I see a lot of people maybe struggle with who want to live a life like this. You have to embrace frugality. If you want to live just being able to live on your farm and not having financial worries, you cannot have the same spending habits that you had prior to making the switch, because then you will just have to, keep your job, and you won't have a lot of time or energy to work on your farm, and so on. And it's hard, because people who want to live on their own farm are people who understand the importance of healthy food, and they will be prone to spending money, and this month over month, this accumulates to a high food bill that is a constant expense, of healthy food, of organic foods and such. And that's all fine and dandy, but the problem is, if you want to change your life, and if you need a starting capital, then you kind of have to sacrifice the present for the future sometimes. And you have to say, okay, now I will live a few years, I will live like a poor man, so that I can, start accumulating this kind of capital. And the important thing is that, everybody involved is on board, and if you know that you are working towards something like that, then usually it's easy. I mean, in that period, like we had no problem, between our incomes. We could we could save 1,000 euros every month, no problem, and so doing that month after month really increases your options. On the other hand, if you just insist on keeping a certain standard of living, then it might never happen. You may just stand in place and spin your wheels for years until you kind of decide that you can't do it. And on Twitter, I have a lot of critics that kind of resent me, because I try to convey this message that you don't have to stay in the rat race. They call it the rat race. You don't have to stay in your job, in a job that you hate, in a small apartment that you think is too expensive, and you can make this switch. And then people say, well, but it's kind of, I can't afford the land. You inherited the land. Well, yeah, that's true. I had a help in this sense, that I had a land to start with, but really, you can, if you're a healthy person, capable of work, you can make the switch no matter how modest your starting conditions may be. And especially if you live in a place where land is expensive, like people in the US or in Great Britain, they often complain, like, land here is so expensive. Move where land is cheap. Over here, you can buy, a hectare of pasture. What is it? Like under 2,000 euros, you can, and in a place like Estonia, I think it's even cheaper. And okay, you will have to completely let go of your former life. But on the other hand, people do that for work all the time. I mean, people go to live to different countries, for another job. So I mean, why wouldn't you do it to follow your dream?
So true. Why did you decide to share your journey on Twitter?
Well, you know what the main reason was? Um, it's a bit. It was because of the social isolation, because we are here together, obviously, and we are spouses and best friends, but it helps to kind of have other people who get you, because living like this, you will always be a weirdo for 99% of folks. And that's another thing that people have to accept. This will not change. It's not like if you start living like this, it's not like people will eventually come around and kind of understand what you're about. For most people, you will always be a freak. And having people online who are supportive and who get you kind of helps you stay on track. And okay, I'm not crazy, maybe there's few of us, but we do exist. And that's the reason we got on Twitter, just to find like-minded people.
It worked well. What was your inspiration? Like, did you read a book that maybe motivated you, or just because you lived on a farm before, you wanted to do it again?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought about it. I guess, well, I remember what she told me in her case. It's you can tell a lot of a person's personality by their preferred aesthetic, like the music the person listens to, the images she likes to look at and stuff. And I think we are kind of genetically wired for this kind of life. We come from the same subculture, we are heavy metal fans, and we kind of found each other on thanks to that, and certain genres of that music, kind of everybody who is interested in them has an interest for this kind of life, at least on paper. At least they admire it from afar, and then some of us want to take it all the way, and we actually want to live like this. It's the genre of music where you will have pastoral images on album covers and such, and we kind of come from that background. And we are also we also don't fit that well into that background, because that subculture often corresponds with certain political opinions that we don't share, like very racist opinions and everything. We politically don't belong anywhere, because, one side says we are too right-wing, the other side says we are too left-wing, and nobody really likes us. And so you find a few people on Twitter, and
What are your future goals? Do you foresee yourself in this kind of lifestyle all your life, or you also think you will include something more, something different?
sincerely, I think we see each other in this life permanently, and we have kind of we took root here. It's you really want people have this ability. Well, at least many people, to really fall in love with a place and to make it your own, and we feel that this is our place, and we will stay here, and we will raise our children here. And it is definitely, for us, it is a long-term project. We don't see it as something that ends at some point. It's just the life we have chosen for ourselves. And yes, there are other things I think we wish to do. I regret not having time, work on some of my hobbies. But on the other hand, it's all for the best, because I have kind of come to terms with it, that you have a finite amount of time and you have to sacrifice some things, and that's okay. So I think she's okay with that too. You will have to. You will have to make sacrifices no matter which road in life you choose. So, I mean, it just comes down to making the right sacrifices. I see that on Twitter, when people write about this, wanting to live this kind of life, I notice that there are two different currents. There are people who want to, and you kind of touched on that before, that want to move to the countryside as a sort of retirement, to enjoy life. And there are people who want to move to the countryside as, as their vocation, as something you do for work. And I think we have to make a really distinction between these two things, because the advice that will work for one group of people won't work for the other. If you want to, like, if you are somebody who is professionally accomplished, who is financially secure, and who wants to buy a property in Tuscany or somewhere, and just enjoy retirement there on their farm and with a few farmhands, and that is a completely different life. It is a completely different kind of goal, even though it might look similar on the surface. And that is a very nice goal. I respect those people very much. But on the other hand, we don't have, I don't know if we have a lot of stuff in common that we can talk about, because the focus is so different, So I think it's important when people choose, when people say, okay, I want to live like this, they really have to be clear. Like, do I want it as a retirement, or do I want it as, really the farming, the ranching, or whatever lifestyle? And you have to be clear on that, and you have to plan accordingly, because they're very different things. And often in online discussions, this creates animosity, because, for example, when you tell people how this kind of life is affordable and how they can do it, and if you live in a first world country, you can save up to live like this in the course of a year or 2 years. It's absolutely doable for anybody who has two healthy arms and legs. People will get angry, and they will tell me, I'm spreading this information because you can't actually do it, because this and this and this and this costs that much and that much and that much. But that is only true if you are doing it in a way, if you are having more of a retirement mindset. If, on the other hand, you are thinking about investing your work here and not investing money, it's amazing how much you can do with how little, by adding value with your own work. And this is kind of the message I want to get across, and that's the main point of my Twitter, is that, the young people who want to live like this, who are constantly being told that it's a fantasy, that it's impossible, it's not. And that's the point I want to make across. You need a starting capital, especially if you don't have land in the family. But that doesn't have to be a lot of money. There are places like my country where really, if you work a McDonald's job in America, you can save up to buy land here, and it's fertile land. It's a temperate climate. It's good people. It's not. You're not buying land in North Africa, where you've had 5,000 years of erosion and you don't have any topsoil or anything. This is great land. I mean, this is so fertile that it's almost a problem, because during the vegetation season it grows too fast, and it's literally, pun intended, dirt cheap. You can do it. I mean, it's perfectly possible. You don't even need to have a great job. I mean, I was able to save up a ton of money, enough money to buy a good chunk of land here by just being a baker. And I didn't even finish a school for it. I learned it on the job. And I wasn't a baker in America or Germany. I was a baker in Croatia, and that's a whole other story. So that's kind of what I'm trying to say. It can be done, and a lot of people will tell young people who are willing to put in the work, who are willing to make the sacrifices to build a life like this, they will tell them, no, you can't do it because the investment is too big, you can never save that much money. And that's kind of the main thing I'm trying to say. No, you can do it, and the investment doesn't have to be big. It just comes down to the sacrifices you're ready to make. And that's pretty much it. I think I've said everything.
There's also a third wave that's a bit like me. Right now, I'm more into learning these kind of things because I don't see myself like doing this full time, but at the same time, I don't see myself being in a city all time and just working on a laptop all day. And I'm trying to understand is that if it's possible to have a sort of part-time farm and living closer to nature most of the time, and then maybe having like 4 hours of intellectual activities, these kind of things, because I found a lot of satisfaction in my day job, for example. I also spend a lot of time in the gym that I could also spend outside by building something for real. This is basically my journey, like what I want to understand and learn before jumping maybe into a new sort of lifestyle.
Well, I'm sure it can be done. I mean, I don't see a reason. You just have to be conscious of the goal, what you want your, life to look like, and you have to plan accordingly. So obviously, if you want to have a job that requires you to be away from your farm for like a few hours every day, at least, then you will have to plan your farm accordingly, but it absolutely can be done. I mean, farming, different kinds of farming can be done with very different time inputs. I mean, the guy I bought cattle from now, they are going on vacation in 2 weeks and they will be gone for like a week, because that's one thing, they have cattle. They don't have smaller animals in a very wild area that is teeming with predators. So they can afford to put up electric fencing during the part of the year when they have a lot of food naturally, and they can go away for a week because the cattle will stay within the fencing. If a predator tries to come in, the cattle will most likely kill him because, they're cattle. They're not rabbits or lambs or something. It's very different. People look at it like you have farming and then you have other jobs. But in reality, farming is a lot of different jobs. There is cattle farming, there's chicken farming, there's gardening, there's tree plantations. There's so many. Like, if you want, I mean, a job that leaves you a lot of freedom with your time, I think people should consider just having, for example, tree plantations, because that is really allows you for a great degree of freedom. So, I think that's important. I think it's important understanding that there's like 100 or 500 possible jobs there. And you just have to pick the right ones, and they can suit pretty much any lifestyle.
That's great news.
Thank you so much for having us. And this was the first time we did something like this. Thank you for thinking of us, and thank you for asking us all these questions. It's been very fun for us.
Thank you very much for your availability, and I think you did great. For me, it was the second episode, so I don't have much experience either. So I'm very happy to have this conversation.
Let's keep the conversation going. Let's
Sure.
keep spreading the news.
True. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Bye.